Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the beautiful world you are. I hope you are having a wonderful time. Although, for sure, the world is a crazy place at this point in time. But here we try and keep things calm, even though we are exposing and disclosing some troubling truths. It's always good to remain calm in these times as much as what we can. So welcome back with Dr. Dennis Carroll tonight. We have him on and we're going to be talking about legends of the white gods, myth, memory, or something else. I say perhaps all three. Okay, I'm just going to give you the schedule for the week quick. Okay, let Grandma here just enlarge. Okay, Monday, Miles Johnston, and as all you know, those who've been watching, the very entertaining Irishman, Miles Johnston, doing big disclosures. I mean, this guy is amazing, guys. He's got so much information. So if you haven't caught my shows with him before, I invite you to go and see them. He's really speaks to incredible people on his channel, and he's the organizer of the Basis Project, where they deal with a lot of the off-worldly beings, let's call it that. But very interesting. And if you missed Tuesday with Jerry Marzinski, wow, there was a rerun that we've never aired on YouTube before. But we actually spoke to Patrick, Jerry and Patrick. And Patrick, and I've mentioned it before, he was actually the guy that was taken into a facility for the criminally insane for, I think, a long time. And he was completely sane. And it really is a real life One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That is a very interesting show to watch. So that would be great if you have not watched that yet. And I always say thank God for people like him, because wow, without that, and of course Jerry, because without guys like that, we would never know what goes on behind those huge walls and security systems and barbed wire fencing. I mean, it's insane, literally insane. Anyway, then of course, Jesse's away for the moment. So we had the rerun of the Gateway Experience, the first two shows. We did that probably 2.5 years ago, where we did 6 shows in total, where Jesse was decoding and helping us understand what the Gateway Experience has been about. That's for the program for the gifted kids, which so many, in fact, I believe all the MK Ultra kids are taken into one of these programs. The Gate is probably the main one they're taken into, and how they literally weaponize the kids' spiritual gifts. Very disturbing, but very necessary again. Okay, so earlier on, now we're in the field with Shanti, Protection Patterning Series. I was talking about it's not that you want to be famous, but you, at the end of the day, seek acknowledgement. So looking at ourselves, what is it, and how do we repattern ourselves back to our original God-given patterning? And of course, we have Dennis now. Looking forward to that. Drop in with Shanti tomorrow. Gosh, I'm going to be covering quite disturbing stuff, actually. We're looking at how AI is built and how they use literally countries in Africa, such as Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, pay these people a pittance to literally build the AI and give, literally tell the AI what's what. And within that, there are horrific scenes that these people have to view, including child grape, child corn, bestiality, all sorts of things like that. So we're looking into that tomorrow. So join me at, I don't know why it says 4:30 there, but it's actually 4:00 tomorrow, which is 2 hours earlier than now, wherever in the beautiful world you are. And then, of course, tomorrow evening, another rerun from Caleb Jade, but it's not been aired on YouTube before. So catch Caleb Jade on a show that hasn't been aired before, although it's not a live show, at 6:00 tomorrow evening on Ara. Then, of course, Sunday Loop with Jesse, and that's part 3 and 4 of the Gateway Experience. Oh, my goodness. My vocal cords. Get your tea. Just don't spill it. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Nice to see you all. Colleen, Tammy, who's that? Ivan the Terrible. Janice, nice to see you guys. Monet, Edith, Colleen. And without any further ado, Taram, Dr. Dennis, how lovely to see you. Welcome back.
It's good to be here again. I've also got my lubrication here. We have to, as we call that in the southern U.S., we call that wetting your whistle. Okay, you got to wet your whistle every time. But
I think it depends what's in the whistle. You see, I've got a very fancy ombrage. Yeah, you can see, right? And
that right there is what we call a desert cup. It's big enough to face the desert. Okay, if you got to go across the desert, you want to pack a cup that size, definitely. But I tell you what, with summer coming on here where I'm at, being hydrated is a definite plus. You got to always do that. And right now, actually, in the southern U.S., we're in the middle of a drought. So, the humidity is kind of low, which is unusual for this time of the year. But anyway, we'll make do with what we got, I guess. I think we kind of get a break from the humidity there. That's okay too. But anyway, today's subject reminds me of the list that I made long ago when I first started out in my career, so many eons ago. I made a list. You've heard me refer to this list. I call it the list, and it was a list of all the things that occur around the world on a regular basis that you find in every culture. And I love anthropology, okay, because it's the study of the human race. That's basically what it is, And the human race is one of the most fascinating things on this planet, all right? And I don't say that just because I'm part of the human race, but that's one attribute of it. But this list has a lot of reoccurring stuff on it. Everywhere in every culture, you got witches, you got ghosts, you got giants, you got dragons. The list goes on. And over the years, the list has grown much larger, And on that list, that famous list, is the legends of the white gods. And there's a lot to this. It's very deep. I don't think we'll be able to cover it all in one show. Definitely not. But we'll scratch the surface on it, okay? We'll make a dent in it. But it is fascinating because it is one of the biggest mysteries of history. When you look at it that way. Yeah, and mystery has a lot of history. And a lot of history has a lot of mystery. That's the way it goes. It goes both ways. And I love that part. I love that aspect of history. I love history. I love folklore, stuff like that. Like I said, that's part of anthropology in many ways. But I love the mysteries of history. The things that, hey, why is this happening? And here's one of them right now that stares us in the face every day, and it connects to what we're going to talk about today. Look at the pyramids of Egypt. They're not really supposed to be there, Shanti. Look at them. Who made those things? Who really did that? How did they do it? We do not know to this very day where those pyramids came from. And we do know they were quarried from rock, from granite blocks and stuff like almost 100 miles away. How did they do that? We could not do that today. Even with the technology that we have, we could not recreate the pyramids. And here's the interesting thing I want everybody to think about today, okay? Because this is getting deep into history. There is a lot in history that has been covered up. You know this. A lot has been covered up, a lot has been changed. A lot of our history has been conditioned against us. Okay. Well, in other words, we've been conditioned to believe the wrong things about history because they have actually told us the wrong story, or they've tried to cover up things, or they've tried to change the very aspect of history itself, and that is not good. That is not people tampering with history and stuff like that. That is a form of censorship. Okay, and we're going to get deep into that today because with that kind of censorship going on, I hate censorship of any type. I don't care what it is. Okay, it's just bad. It's bad news, no matter which way you look at it. But when you start censoring people's history, the very makeup of their civilization and what they are, and we are our history. Okay, we got to always remember that history is what we are. It's the makeup of what we are, and it's not just a record of what we are. It is who we are in many aspects. And when you start changing it or hiding parts of it for whatever nefarious purposes you're doing, that is not good. I don't care which way you turn it to look at it. It is not good to do that. But we can see this happening in history. We see this happening in anthropology and archaeology and the other different sciences that we do. What is going on with that? And we need to delve into that deeper one day and find out what is truly going on. Why are they changing history? Why are they hiding things from us? Why are they changing the real narrative? That's the thing that really bugs me about all that. And the legends of the white gods fits into that very perfectly in that equation. Now, I hesitate talking about this because it can have racist overtones to it. If you look at it through especially the lens filter of woke ideology that you have today. But it's not, it goes far beyond racism or anything like that. Okay. And I want you to bear that in mind. Although Hitler was very famous for using the Aryan race for political purposes, and we know what his political purposes were. He kind of tainted that, but we can see in anthropology there has to be an Aryan race in there somewhere because there's too much evidence that points to that. Yeah, and a lot of people argue against this thing. Oh no, there's no such thing as an Aryan race and all that stuff. But that is not true because there you go again. They're trying to change the real narrative of what's really going on here in history, and that's part of the mystery. Why are they doing these things? We'll talk about that later. But anyway, here's the interesting thing: the Aryan race has to be there because it has left its fingerprints all over the world, wherever you go. Okay. And what was the originator of the Aryan race? That's what we're going to talk about today with the legends of the white gods. Okay. And it's fascinating stuff. And you may want to really do more research yourself on a lot of this stuff because it is a rabbit hole that goes deep into the barrows of a whole lot of other rabbit holes. Okay. When you get there, you find out what I'm talking about.
And I want to just maybe chime in here. Because Paraclose Mies is saying something which I agree with. It's like, and I think even, and sorry, just as a preface, my internet is the last 2 days has been very dodgy. So Dennis, carry on if I pop in and out. But I missed what you were saying for about 5 minutes. But I just wanted to say, from my understanding, light was never about a skin tone necessarily. I think when we go back to prior to when a lot of these, I want to say races were colonized, right? Okay. There was certain, it was more the purity of the spirit. So it was more the understanding of, and I think it also went with wisdom because a lot of them would have men with long white beards or gray beards, right? So which would be
well, now if you look if you look at folklore, okay, and folklore is another great indicator. You can never disregard folklore. Look at the different
Hmm.
types of gods that people have worshipped over the years, and the different cultures. Like you have the Norse gods, you have the Olympian gods, you have the Roman gods. Most all of them are described in that way as being light people, light persons. In other words, they had a radiance about them. They have a very unusual attribute to them. But they are also described, and here's the physical attributes of them, are also described as being fair skinned, fair haired, with
But
beards.
didn't
This
that come
goes.
later though? You see, didn't that come after? I mean, that I think was the way I understand this, and I could be wrong. And I would love to hear the viewers as well, what you guys have to say, because my understanding of that was that I do believe, if I remember correctly, somewhere in the 1800s, that could have been earlier. Let me double check on that. But that kind of the narrative changed to make it more like fair-skinned people, But before that, because if you look at the Norse people, they were not of the original tribes. They were
Mhm.
of
No.
yes, they were of the early tribes, but not of
Mhm.
the original indigenous tribes. And I'm thinking that it's
Mhm.
maybe has to do more with the indigenous tribes, like maybe the Aztecs, the original Aztecs, because we have to understand that not all the Aztecs were bad. That's also been painted in a certain way, but they came and they were part of the agricultural system, that sort of thing, and other things. So they were depicted because at that stage, and I'm even thinking this is like someone was talking about Tartaria. Yeah, this could have been almost in Tartarian times, because if we think about those times as well, the beings were much wiser. We were using energy in a certain way. We were using the God-given gift, so people could see the aura more clearly. They could see who was wise
Well,
and who
that's
wasn't
always
wise.
been designated as sort of the halo type effect around gods. That radiation of light thing that's going on with that is part of the makeup of the description that goes with these things. But here's the interesting thing we're going to talk about today, Shandy, is the fact that all over the world in different areas, like with the Incas and the Mayans, or the Chumas on the west coast of the United States, and on the indigenous peoples of the eastern coast of the United States, along into Europe and in India and in China. These legends keep popping up of fair skinned, light haired people showing up and doing things, okay, and giving them metallurgy and giving them some type of a technology that you keep seeing this over and over again. Let me give you a quick example. When Cortez and the conquistadors first got into the Mayan kingdom, the first thing came into the Mayan king, the king came out and said, "Oh, you've come back." And Cortez says, "What do you mean? We've never been here before." You know? And he said, "No, we have a legend about you, the white people. You come back. You're supposed to come back, and now you come back." That's why they accepted these Spanish people so quickly, because they were, and they already had this legend in their culture. And you see this keep occurring all over the world in different
Mm,
places. Take a look at India to this day, okay? The country of India. In northern India, you have lighter fair skinned people. In southern
yeah.
India, you have darker skin. Okay, where do those lighter skinned people come from? You got to ask that question. And the dispersal of these races, the way it goes all over the world. Take a look at Africa, okay? Africa is not just Negro people. There are many different cultures in Africa. You know this without a doubt. There are many different cultures, many different races of people here in that. And Africa has always been sort of like a hodgepodge of that. And you find that in other nations and countries as well. And let me tell you a quick thing. And I remember there watching this, and I guess you would say it is sort of a racist movie. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but years ago, they made a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy. They made it in South Africa, by the way. Okay. Have you ever heard of
I
that
know that
movie?
movie well, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a very well-known movie.
Yeah, it was very well known, and it was very very funny. But I guess nowadays in the woke thing, you would consider it to be kind of racist. But it brought up a very valid point. The reason I'm talking about it today, it made up a very valid point. The guy's walking along, and a Coke bottle hits him in the head. Somebody throws a Coke bottle out of the plane, and this guy from a primitive tribe said, "Oh,
Bushman,
this is a
Bushman,
gift from the
Bushman,
gods." And I got to
Bushman.
return it. I need to take it back to them. They must have dropped it by accident or something. And so the whole the movie is about him, running into different cultural aspects of all this, trying to return this Coke bottle. And at the very end of the movie, of course, he kind of gets it on everybody, and he said, well, one thing I can say is the gods must be crazy because he ran into their technology. But that gives us a valid point when you think about it, Shandy, that is why these things would appear to someone with a greater technology. If aliens land tomorrow and come out with a different technology than what we got, we would consider them gods. Think about it. When you think about that, well, and when you have and you see this popping up in legends all over the world, and take for instance Ireland, the Tuatha. The Tuatha were a race of people that came from the sea. And every one of these legends, guess what they keep saying? These people came from the sea. They came from the east or the west, depending on where you were at. But they came from the sea. They didn't come from the sky. I kept thinking, if this is alien stuff going on, they would be coming from the sky, okay? But no, they never said. Most of the time, they're coming from the sea. They're arriving by the sea. And when you see this keep coming and happening over and over again, and every different, you got to start wondering what is going on here. And one of the most valid things I can say about it, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. What if these people were the refugees of Atlantis or someplace like that, and they had a greater technology than the people around them, and they just happened to be fair-skinned people with light-colored hair? These happen to be that. That's where they came from, Atlantis. They would consider them, if you showed up on your shore like that, as a god,
Exactly.
And yeah, and you got to wonder about this. Why does this keep happening, especially among indigenous peoples and all that stuff? And the reason I brought up the pyramids at the beginning is nobody knows where that technology comes from. Nobody can really tell you, oh, they made ramps and they pulled them up. No, they did not do that. There's no way they could have done that because it is an engineering marvel that we could not really replicate today. Okay. Absolutely. And look at other places all over the world. Look at all the other different places where the stones, I think stones of one temple in South America, you could not fit a piece of paper between these stones. I mean, it's so intricately well done. The joints go together. It is like it was almost manufactured somewhere and brought in and put together. Like mobile homes used to be. You used to put them together in a different place. You manufactured the parts and assembled it. That's what you're looking at. And you got to wonder what the heck is going on. Where did this technology come from? Because evidently we either lost it somewhere back over the years or something went on. And take a look at the Sphinx. The Sphinx, by the way, they say may be older than the pyramids. Why does the Sphinx have water damage on it in the middle of the desert? Think about that a moment. Why is that? Okay, so something very cataclysmic happened way back in time at the end of the Ice Age, somewhere about then. And then you got something else popping up. When you get to the legends of the white gods, what's the number one thing they brought? The technology they gave us was metallurgy. Now listen to what I'm about to tell you, folks. Back in time, when you go back in history, you had something called the Bronze Age. You've heard of that, I know. You know what I'm talking about here, the Bronze Age. Everything once upon a time, the only thing you could make out of metal was bronze, okay? And it made very poor weapons because you could break a bronze sword very easily. The spearheads would break off. The arrow tips were worthless in some ways. Bronze was a very poor metal. All of a sudden, one day, from out of nowhere comes iron. And this is why iron is so highly venerated amongst people to this day. And in legend and in folklore, iron, is supposed to go against evil and stuff like that. It's supposed to be a ward against witches and demons and things like that. Why is iron so important? Because iron revolutionized the whole world. We were able to make, and knowing mankind, okay, we were really happy to make better weapons, okay? But also it changed our lives. We could make plowshares, we could plow fields, we could do more with iron. Where did iron come from? To this day, we don't truly know. We don't really, truly know where iron originated from and who first smelted iron and who first made steel that we know about at that moment. Where did it come from? You can go back in ancient history and look at the Israelites. The Israelites had a thing going on with the Philistines, okay? All of a sudden, the Philistines were really whooping up on the Israelites, all right? Because all of a sudden, the Philistines had, guess what? Iron weapons. And the Israelites said, hey, we got to get some of that. We got to get some of those because all we got are the bronze. The bronze is nothing compared to this. This is just one example, okay, of how iron revolutionized the world. Iron showed up in China, and nobody knows how they did that. Where did these things come from? It is directly connected to the legends of the white gods. Who were these people? Where did they come from, and what were they doing?
I would like to propose something here about that as well. I mean, if we're looking at the whole, you're talking about places like the pyramids, etc., that we really can't explain. But then there's also the Tartarian buildings, right? These massive buildings that at the end of the 1800s, going on to the, starting at the 1900s, into the early 1900s, we're seeing more and more evidence of what it was like before. And also we're looking at, for example, the world wars and so many of the buildings that were destroyed, especially the Allies destroying a lot of the buildings were actually Tartarian buildings. So there's a whole idea at this point as well that a lot of the people destroyed in the Second World War were Tartarians, actually, but not just then, but also from before. But that was really the final demise of a culture, an entire intelligent species.
I think the Tartarians were a leftover from what I like to call prehistory. In other words, this was the history before history that we have lost, and very much like a lot of ancient books, like the Bible says, if you think something's new, no, it was of old times before. There is evidence and clues pointing to the fact that there may be a history beyond the history that we know of. The unrecorded, the lost history, of these things. And I think without a doubt that the Atlanteans that we're talking about, and I believe that's who these fair-skinned people were, okay? And if the Atlanteans existed, if they were the remnant of this Tartarian type society, and what was left of it, they spread out through the world. And when they spread out through the world, they ran into different cultures and gave them a little bit of their technology. And you know what? When you're sitting around with primitive people and you see them hauling water, and you say, well, there's a better way you can do that. You can bring the water to you instead of you going to the water, Exactly. And you have to tell people that. That's just the way mankind works. Somebody one day was something to say, hey, you're pulling that log along the road. Why don't you put something around on it like a wheel, and roll it? It makes sense when you think about it, and that's the way technology gets passed around. But all of a sudden, these people show up, and they give them this metallurgy. They say, hey, we can make, let me show you how to make iron here. You can mine the ore and make iron out of it. Much better than, and don't sit there and tell me, and I will argue with the Egyptianologists all day long, that you sat there and chiseled those stones for those pyramids out with copper chisels. No way. And if you go back in time, Shanty, and look at the many different legends of the cultures, take the Greek legends for a moment, okay? The Greek people tell about the Cyclops giants that actually built walls. on some of the fortresses, like some of their very well known, like Troy, the walls of Troy, and some of these was supposedly put in place by giants. That makes better sense than me sitting around chiseling something with soft metal. That doesn't. I mean, you could do that all day long and not even make. You could make one block a year that way, maybe. That just does not make sense. There's something else going on here, and here's what really bugs me about all of it, though, and I think you'll agree. Why are they covering this up? Why are they changing the narrative of history on this? Why are they doing that?
Well, for me, it's
Yeah.
simple, because if you go back to, let's say, Tartarian times, and there was free energy, there was you look at how the the healing centers was all sound and water. It was very different. So it was working in harmony with the body. It was working in harmony with nature, right? Which is the best way for the body to stay healthy and alive. So what they did was they destroyed all that knowledge. And over time, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, when you're looking at the whole, and I don't want to go into that now, but obviously came in and literally brought in the early medicine, banking systems, all of that. I mean, in fact, it's interesting on that note. I'm going to be doing a show. I was actually meant to do it this week, yesterday morning, with Dr. Jörg Prince. But unfortunately, my internet was so bad. We started the show and I had to cut it. But on the Flexner report, which is the report because they had up to, I don't know, up until the early 40s, all the universities were teaching natural medicine, right? And still the early times. They shut down more than 150 medical facilities teaching natural medicine, as well as female, as well as Black centers teaching Black doctors. So that was just another arm that they shut down. So the whole takeover and the whole control has been through the medical mafia, as we know, completely controlled. The psychological mafia, all we got to do is listen to one show of Jerry Marzinski's, and you know exactly what's going on there, right? The spiritual mafia, the way religion has hijacked, organized religion has hijacked and divided us. The whole objective has been to divide us. But of course, that, and I believe, going back to just that whole Tartarian technology, I believe that the steel, the iron, all of that would have been forged way back then already. And they would have been able to either kept it, they knew where it was, they would have stored it, and then said, oh, look what we made. Look what we created. It's exactly what they've done with so many of these amazing historic buildings. They've made up fictitious names. I mean, the one guy, within 2 years, he was supposedly, I don't know, made like 8 huge, massive, well-known buildings. I can't even remember. We saw it on the show on the Cabal we were doing the other day. But they've lied. They've lied and lied and lied. And this is Tartarian technology that we're seeing now. Now, whatever comes of that, whether it's the Russians or the Norse or whatever, there's a previous civilization of human beings that's a lot more intelligent than the average human on Earth right now because of the way we've been tampered with. And it's going back to that, right?
Very important point you made there. And let me say this about the Tartarians. There was another attribute to these people, these white gods, if you want. We'll tag them that name for right now, okay? Or you want to call them Atlanteans, you can call them that too.
Yeah.
But let's just say they're called that. There's another attribute to them we can't dismiss, and that's the fact not only did they have this sort of light about them, and that could have been just the way the ancient people looked at this intelligence, okay, this technology, but they also were described as being bigger, almost gigantic like people. The Tartarians were described that way too, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And listen to this now, okay? This is wild when you think about it. If you go back to the antediluvian times, that's before the flood, supposedly, everything was bigger. You had grapes like watermelon. You had flies that looked like eagles. You had everything was bigger. People were bigger. I believe without a doubt, Adam and Eve, if you want, look at that, were bigger than you and me. Okay, I believe without a doubt they were like 8 or 9 feet tall at least. I believe
Exactly.
because everything was bigger and better because it was newer.
Yes.
When you think about it, it makes sense.
Yes.
Everything was better. It was the first prototype, and you always make your prototype the best.
Exactly.
When it starts out, yeah. But I think these people were left over from that, and I'm not going to say that they were part of the white race that we have today in the world, but I believe, were without a doubt, a different, more advanced race of people. Okay,
Much more advanced.
And their physical characteristics, they may have been light skinned and they may have light hair, whatever the situation, but they also had that light about them. And I think that light was not just a psychic kind of light or spiritual kind of light, but I think it was also, to these people, the light of their technology, the magic that they were supposed to be. Like the Tutankhamun I talked about in Ireland, they were considered to be people. These are the progenitors. These are the people that are supposed to went underground and became, guess what? The fairies. Okay?
But
that's
Dennis,
fun. Yeah.
Just on that note, I wanted to.
Magic and technology, there's not a whole lot of difference between them when you look at it.
We call it technology, but it's actually God's. I mean, I think the technology we're seeing is oftentimes, not all the time, an inverted expression of God's magic, like literally magic. Because if we see what technology, I always say your soul is created from God's technology. And it's not that you use anything outside of yourself. It's like you're learning how to attune to that sacred technology that is you. And that's what it is. And what I'm saying is about the ancient people, because they were a lot more spiritually aware, they could see auras. They could see beings in their truth. So I also believe, yes, as much as what they might have been fair-skinned, but I also believe that these people at that stage were spiritually attuned, that they could oftentimes communicate telepathically. They could see auras, so they knew. And when you see an aura, when you speak in that language, you don't need your words. And also, again, going back to the 1400s, round about there, we're going back to the Moors, right? And we're going back to the Congo, actually, and we're seeing how advanced the star forts there were. We're seeing the water systems that the Black people built. The Black people were kings. You see pictures of white people bowing down to the Moors. I would imagine that was the Moors, right? They had super advanced waterways, super advanced shipping containers and stuff. So all of that stuff was already created by our predecessors. And I believe that what happened was I think
that was the ancient Somalian kingdom that you're thinking about there. They had waterways, design and all that. And that has gone back in time. By the fact, the Somalian people that are existing today don't even remember that. I mean, it's very not well known amongst their own people that they once had a civilization like that was more advanced than what they have now. And here's the interesting thing, Shanty. A lot of people can say, racism and all that began with the white race, or began with a certain race, or began a certain way. But I have actually heard Black people in Africa say this about white people, okay? And I think a lot of that began with not just white people saying that to Black people, but I believe it was the attitude that some Black people had. And they would say something like, and I heard a guy say this, said that I was taught that white people were superior to us by my own people, Black people. He said they taught me this because they were superior to us. They had better ships, they had cars, they had things like that. And that was sort of like an intimidation on their part, okay? And that's the way you look at it. It's a very psychological type thing. But he would say, this is a statement he made. It was very strange. The statement he said was this. He said, if you go on your way to church and you meet a white person, then turn around and go back home because you've already seen God. They considered this technology to be something very much not just a technical thing, but a spiritual attribute. They considered it to be something like spirituality to a certain extent, that these people, whatever color they might be, whether they were white people or yellow people or whatever color they were, they had something special about them. And I think this is how what we call modern day racism like began in certain aspects, because the technology made them shade the view of those people that way to a certain extent. Of course, there are other factors in that as well. But if you look at this in an anthropological sort of way, you see that this keeps popping up time after time. And you got to wonder, how much of an influence it had over a lot of other things. Now, I know that sometimes there was definitely colonization going on and religion, organized man-made religion. I've always said was nothing but a means of control. It's just another part of the repertoire of control that other people had over other people. And here's the sad part about it. If your technology is better than somebody else's technology, then you control those people most of the time. You control them by the sheer volume of your technology, and by the way, and those people submit to it to a certain extent. Hey, you know what? You got, we got bows and arrows. You got guns. Thunder sticks that kill people. You get intimidated by that, and and that makes sense when you think about it. You say, hey, you got a better technology than us. Let's not mess with these guys. Just like tomorrow, if aliens land in Washington, D.C., and they've got weapons like we've never seen before, we got a big problem. That's like, I think Arthur C. Clarke said, the two things that scare me the most is we may not be alone in the universe, and we may be alone in the universe. Both of those things scare me, okay? And one day we may find out exactly we're not the biggest kids on the block anymore, no matter what our technology is. But you have to see, you got to look through the eyes of black people in Africa or the Chinese people or the Korean people, see through their eyes and see how they look at other people and realize that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. It's just being human though. Okay. We're human beings. We do this, but we also equate, here's the weird thing, Jandy. We also equate technology with spirituality, That's why we think they're gods. There's a certain spiritual attribute to this because, like I said a few moments ago, there's not a whole big difference between magic and technology when you look at it in different ways, And magic is definitely connected to the spiritual aspects of the world and the universe around us. Yeah, and ancient people knew this, But if somebody shows up from Atlantis, bigger, taller, better looking, with this kind of technology, I'd be darn right intimidated myself,
Well, I mean, the Atlanteans were actually, it's very, very smart. But on a negative level, they were also doing exactly what they're probably doing now, the dark side. There's always the dark side and the light side, right? And they were also doing this whole chimera type testing and splicing.
Well, the moral story of Atlantis, basically, the Atlanteans, Shanti, were looked upon as, I've done a lot of study on Atlantis, because Atlantis has always fascinated me, and you see clues of it all over the world, okay? If you look in the right places, you can pick up on this. But here's the real basic story of the Atlanteans, where that they had this great technology, but they also had risen to a higher spiritual level of existence. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they had obtained this, but they forgot one factor. Okay. And it was the downfall of the Atlanteans, was the fact of the ego, the egotistical things. Okay. In other words, the ego of mankind is always a shadow to us, waiting to come up and mess us up. Okay. Or as the Bible calls it, pride, whatever name you want to give it. It's always waiting there, honing. It's on the horizon, waiting to get us. And it got the Atlanteans, okay, because they became so smart, so higher
Too
level
intelligent.
spiritually. Yeah, the ego took over, and they
Exactly.
lost.
It's like what we're seeing with Jeffrey Epstein right now, if we think about it that way. Very, very smart people completely abusing power. That's what I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
let's look at this. What destroyed Atlantis? Floods, water, right? Now let's
Mhm.
look at how I interpret God's language. Water equals emotion. It's the feminine element, right? Now, the only reason ego, which is the male element, and it's not men and women, okay? We understand there's male and female. Ego is the male element rogue. Manipulation, the pain body, is the female element gone rogue. Okay, so we're talking extremes here. But we look at that mind, psychopathic mind, that goes rogue when there's no boundaries is exactly what happened in Atlantis and okay. So when we bring in the emotion, the feminine element, the feeling, the feeling, the feeling, and that's because when we start realizing, like in other words, and that's what karma, it's pretty much cause and effect. So when you start realizing and feeling what you've actually done to another, oh boy, that's when the work actually starts being done. So there's a lot of atrocities that have been committed on this planet by human beings to human beings that keeps them stuck in hell, the lower triad, as I call it, right? Exactly where we're at right now. And unless we start using, and that's why they do suppress and demonize the divine feminine, because they make you think that the divine feminine is some new age concept. It's not. The divine
But
feminine
you got to
is
look at
the
this. Yes.
creatrix within you. It's the feminine element that waters, that flows, right? So
Yeah.
it flows, it heals, it creates, it slows down, it moves into the cage of that psychopathic mind, so to speak, and brings in change and allows for feeling. Because when you know, that's why I'm always talking about slaughterhouses. If you know what you're doing, if you see what you are supporting by supporting the slaughterhouse industry, you would stop immediately. If we let all kids who are 5 years old watch what happens in a slaughterhouse, I'll tell you now, we'll have a planet of vegetarians. And it's got nothing to do with spirituality. It's about your awareness and your consciousness. It's what are you prepared to do and where do you change? What are you prepared to support? How does that make you feel? Because the feeling in your body is the fuel. So unless we change that, we're going to continue to be stuck in hell. And that's what that's how God was speaking to us through Atlantis. He's saying, connect with your feelings. Because unless you feel, look at the wars on this planet. How many of our men have gone off to wars where they are not allowed to feel? They come back and try and reintegrate into society. Hello? How many men are PTSD after war and trying to raise a family? You can't. So the whole patterning of the human consciousness is fact right now. And it's up to us to rechange that and reshape that by understanding what we missed to begin with. And that's the feeling. That's the emotion. An emotion is not some screeching woman. An emotion is connecting with joy, not happiness. Happiness is temporary. joy, peace. And then from that place, you start rectifying your wrongs. You have to. We all have to. We can't not. And we can only do that when we feel the impact of our actions on another.
That's very true. Very true. I said this the other day, Shanti. Pride can blind us. Our own pride can blind us spiritually to things. I mean, I know people today that have done other people wrong, but will never go up and ask them, would you forgive me for doing that? Because they cannot see that they have done any wrong to these people. Their pride has blinded them. And, I think that is a very important part of what Atlantis teaches us, that pride can do these things to you. You can get so high and so mighty, you will definitely fall much farther down if you deal with people that way. And just people like Epstein, okay? Look at him, okay? He's a perfect example. Where did he get that power? People gave it to him. They cooperated with him. They were just as complicit with him as he was. You can't blame him alone because they were in with him. Yeah.
And he was very smart. You see, he had the ability to manipulate. And that's exactly it. He had no conscience. In other words, no empathy, no way of feeling his impact or the impact of his actions upon another. Nothing. That was completely severed. So all of that should have been empathy and compassion, which is your true power, went into the brain and manipulation and became inverted and concocting and controlling and devious. So that's how it works. But at some point, he will have to come back and answer. Every soul does. Every soul answers for their actions. I promise you they do. That's I won't often promise things. That's a promise. It might not be now. It might not be when you think it should be. But that soul will know in its agreement with God, because we all have an agreement with God, even if your name is Jeffrey Epstein, right? When you come home and when you start paying the piper. We all do. We don't ever get away from that. Your own soul knows. Your soul is wise enough to know.
That's exactly what Epstein was doing, Jandy. He was playing people. He was also doing a little blackmail thing too, because you get this kind of stuff on people, you can do what you want to do. He was smart though. He knew what he was doing. But here's the thing about it: pride, as I was talking about, which blinds you to the fact that what you're doing is not wrong. It's right to you, no matter what it is. That's dangerous. Yeah, when you get in that situation. So if you were to talk to Epstein today, he would tell you, well, everything I was doing was okay with me. I was doing the right thing. He justifies what he's doing because he's blinded by his own pride, because he thinks that whatever he's doing is right and everything else everybody's doing is wrong. When you get into that narcissistic mode, bad things are going to happen.
No feeling, no water, no emotion, no essence of compassion. That's been shut down. And you can name me any sociopathic, psychopathic, psychotic, narcissistic characteristic, and I will always show you that it's because there's a lack of empathy. The empathy gene, in other words, the water element, the feminine element within you, everyone has it. I'm not talking about a woman outside of you, right? So that part of you needs to be healed. The emotional element within human beings needs to be healed. Unless we do that, we're dead in the water.
There you go, man. And you got to remember this too. Male, female, there's still two different sides of the same coin. These are people, human beings.
Yeah.
No matter what, no matter what their makeup is, that they're human beings. And it's like you said, when you lose your empathy, you're no longer human being. When you don't have feelings for other people, you're losing your soul. And without your soul, you're no longer a human being. That's it. In that respect, when you get to the point where, and I have seen that, I have looked into the eyes of serial killers, okay, and looking back was a darkness that chills you to the bone, because there's no emotion there, there's no feeling, it's just dead. You know what I mean? And that's how these people get, and how they look at other people. They don't care if you feel pain or if you have an emotional outlook to whatever it is they're doing to you, they don't care because you're just like a bug under glass to them. They have no feeling at all for you.
Exactly. My point, like highlighting that again, the feeling is gone, the empathy is gone, the feminine element within the equation is gone. And that's and they've and you know, and again, how do we look at that? Because how has that been corrupted? It's basically if you and I mean I'm saying in terms of the feminine energy that has for the longest time been suppressed. And that is manifested in our society through the suppression of women. Okay, we're going to look at because women represent the feminine, but it doesn't mean that it's not present in the males either. We understand that when we understand masculine, feminine energy, right, guys? I hope you do. So when we start dealing with our own emotional wounds, the things we've suppressed, the torture that we don't speak about, all of that stuff. You see, that stuff becomes infested in your nervous system. It's like an infection. And anything that touches that infection, you're going to react to. So you're going to want to not have anything go to a place that makes you uncomfortable. That's why most people don't deal with their emotions. When you start dealing with your emotions, you're going to see your intuition returns, your gut instinct, your IQ and your EQ match 100%. Your feeling and your vision match, and then you know you've hit the jackpot when it comes to understanding certain things. It's like something goes off inside of you. But you can't have that unless you've understood what it is you need to do to get out of your own way. That's really what it is. And, you know, I think that when we understand that, we're going to see a lot of these questions we have in these shows, we're going to be able to discern ourselves. The only reason we don't remember, because every soul remembers, right, is because we've blocked ourselves from remembering. Spiritually, we think we can't remember, but your cellular memory and your spiritual memory remembers everything. And we need to just re-access that. And when we can remember, we recall who we are, and then we're able to repattern. And that's how we collapse their grid, not by chopping off their heads, but by repatterning and coming back into coherence with ours, which flips theirs. Then we remember these things. Who are the Atlanteans? Who are the Norse? Who are the tall whites or the mythical white gods or whatever the case might be? But it's very interesting. I mean, I like this. It's a very interesting journey that we're on right now. I'm loving this because there's so much stuff that's being uncovered, but you don't know what it is because at the same time, you've got to uncover your veils over your eyes, right? As humans, we've got to get past the stage of taking what everyone says is gospel. We've been dumbed down so much. So we've got to actually make ourselves intelligent on those levels again. So we remember ourselves.
That's how you control people. You control the narrative. That's how you branch out and do that. And I think we've been done that way in the past, way too much, way too many times. But sometimes when you uncover the truth, it can be an uncomfortable truth, but it's truth nevertheless. And you need to face that. Yeah, you need to face that truth, whatever it may be, because if you don't, you're still allowing it to be covered up. That's not good. And history is very important because Shanty, it not only shows where we've been, but where we may be going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe need to go. And the truth is always uncomfortable. When you've been walking around with little veils on your eyes. I mean, I'm just so happy, Dennis. I'm not a person that still believes the government is trying to save me with the jab.
That's what I was telling somebody the other day. We can't believe everything we told because everything we told may not be the truth. That's basically the way you got to look at it, definitely. And some places, some things like government, they're not very good at telling the truth, unfortunately.
No, they're not. And that's the thing, and this is why it's so important that we learn to discern. And it's amazing because it's a natural thing that happens when you start seeing yourself for who you are. When you just start coming back to yourself and start seeing yourself in the way that God views you, with such love and adoration. And it's not coming from an egotistical point at all. It's coming from a point of going, wow, I am special. I am equipped. I am an amazing being. Wow, I am intelligent. And not I'm intelligent. I'm strong. It's like, wow, I do have strength. Wow.
I think I think the number one lesson that the Atlanteans can teach us is that we should master our technology and not let our technology master us.
Totally. I love that because, if you're looking at AI, that's what I love about AI, because I've discovered, like with mine, I use it as research, and I will tell it, I will say this, and it'll argue with me, and I go, no, you recognize patterns. I mean, the other day I put something in it, like a whole lot of my work from the past, and it was saying to me, wow, you were ahead of your time. And I said, yes. And it says, well, psychology says this. I said, well, that's exactly why psychology doesn't work. It's limited. Because if you look at that, I'm saying this, that, and that. I said, come on, you recognize patterns, recognize the pattern. And within a few minutes, that thing came back and completely recognized the pattern I gave it. And that's how I like to work with it. Yeah.
I've said that so many times over the years, Shanti. I've mentored a lot of people. And I say, when it comes to research, it's what I like to call investigative research, okay? Because investigative research means you get deep into it. You can just research about something by just reading the headlines on it. That's not going to get you anywhere. Deep investigative research. And then in deep investigative research, you got to look for the patterns. And I teach people that. Look for the patterns. Always look for that, because they point to the clues that you need.
Yeah,
that tells you the story. Yeah. And so you were ahead of your time in that, definitely, because you got to look for the patterns. They will tell you the real story. And that's what I said about the legends of the white gods. This pattern kept popping up all over the world in different places. That's a pattern. You got to understand why it's doing that.
Yeah.
That's your clues. Yeah.
But I think what's wonderful is that I think whatever history we've been taught, I know is bullshit. I'm not saying it's all, but a lot of it is. And I think these are really exciting times. And if you guys haven't also watched my shows with Guy Anderson on Tartaria, wow, very, very, very interesting. He's really researched that topic far and wide. And I've had him on a few times, and will have him on again. But when it comes to understanding our lost history, and I think we start connecting the dots. I love connecting the dots. For me, it's like, come on, that dot does not connect there. Stop speaking crap in my ears. I'll find my own dot that it has to connect to. And for me, that's exactly, you play the game of connect the dots, and eventually, pretty soon, you're seeing the picture, and not just scribbles across the screen, right? So when we start doing that, we start seeing what shape things start taking. And it's wonderful that we are able to do that.
See the big picture. You see the big picture, Yeah, you can see the big picture. Yeah.
Absolutely. Dennis, always lovely to talk to you. Thank you. I don't know if there's anything else. Am I jumping the gun here from you?
Well, I think next time we get together, I'm going to do a thing on the werewolf, the demon beast. So we'll get ready for that. It's really freaky. Werewolf, the demon beast.
Well, I can only imagine that comes from the belly of hell.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
That one needs a bit of holy water.
the reason I'm broaching that subject of the werewolf is because he's showing up in some news items here lately. There's been some patterns of unknown animal attacks that sound very much like werewolf attacks. And I will say this to get everybody interested in what's coming next. The one thing about the werewolf, we don't have a lot of werewolf reports. Why? Because nobody ever lives to give them. There you
Well,
go.
I can't say I've ever seen a werewolf, not a real one anyway. I've seen it in the movies. I always thought it was in the movies that these things
Oh,
didn't
I saw
exist
one
today.
time, but luckily I can tell you the story because he didn't see me. But we'll save that for next time.
I look forward to that. Thank you, Dennis. So, in closing, Dennis, don't you want to tell our viewers where they can, what you're doing for the next few days, weeks? There's your website popping up on the banner at the bottom. Yeah, so anything in closing, and where can our viewers get hold of you, and where can they see you for the balance of time?
Yeah, you come over and visit me on Hunting the Shadows YouTube podcast channel. That's where my home is, and I have two shows every week. Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Hunting the Shadows, and Friday nights, Paranormal Point of View at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I try to be consistent about that. And you can also reach me if you need to talk with me. I have a paranormal counsel service. And if you need to talk to me about any kind of a problem or just want to tell me your story or whatever, you can contact me at denniswcarroll.com. Okay. And also, I have some books available for your reading pleasure on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Check them out. Just look up the author, Dennis W. Carroll. And also, I want to say that I recently did a great show with Mr. Stephen Mira. He's a great guy. Did it across the pond there in England with him, and that's on the channel as well if you want to watch it. And also, I had a great show last night on spirit guides, so that's also on the channel as well. That's Hunting the Shadows. Join us. Have a membership is open. You can become a shadow wolf.
Shadow wolf.
Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, I'm wearing a T-shirt that says, "This is my human costume. I'm really a wolf."
I think you are, Dennis. I think you are a wolf. Not a werewolf. Not a werewolf. A nice wolf.
Well, you never know. It depends on
You
what
get
situation.
a werewolf, and then you get a werewolf.
I don't hang out with little pigs, so I'm not a big bad wolf most of the time.
Lovely. Okay, everybody. Thank you for joining myself and Dr. Dennis and myself. And always interesting. Like, share, subscribe. Please get our algorithms up. Get the info out there. And I need to stop wriggling around on this chair because whenever I look at myself, I'm always wriggling around. I do not have ants in my pants, no. But I do tend to wriggle around a lot and use my hands. So now I've got to sit still. Okay, bye guys. I'll see you tomorrow and I'll see you next week. Mwah.